What's going on, guys? Welcome to the first episode of the J&J Sports Podcast. I'm Jack Beanick. Alongside me, the talented, the intelligent Johnny King. We are here today late in the NFL season. There's a lot going on. We got college football bowl games. The NFL playoff race is fascinating. The NBA is starting to take shape a little bit. And then, of course, the coaching carousel and the transfer portal in college football are going absolutely bonkers this season. So we'll get into all of that and then some more. So, Johnny, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go if you are, Jack.
All right. So, starting things off today, it is Thursday. So, we have a Thursday night football game tonight, the 49ers against the Titans. Both these teams square in the playoff hunt. The Titans are probably in a little bit of a better position than the 49ers right now. They sit at 9-5 currently and third in the AFC. The 49ers 8-6. They're sixth in the NFC, but the 49ers have looked really good recently. And I frankly do not know if there is any team in the NFL right now that can slow down this 49ers rushing attack when they start getting Deebo Samuel involved, Brandon Ayuk involved, Jeff Wilson involved. I mean, they're running 10 different guys in the backfield and nobody can seem to stop the 49ers.
That's that all-around talent.
And
it's hard to stop.
You factor in the facts that they want to run the ball, but Jimmy Garoppolo is not a bad quarterback. When he needs to make the throws, he can. And you have George Kittle, who's one of the best tight ends in the league. You have Deebo Samuel, who's fast. They've got weapons on the outside. I still don't completely trust the Titans without Derrick Henry. They've still got, I mean, we never know how healthy AJ Brown and Julio Jones are going to be on any given week. Ryan Tannehill is hit or miss. The 49ers are a 3-point favorite right now. That line actually got bet down to 3. It started at 3.5. I like the 49ers tonight. Again, that's a big game for the 49ers because they likely are not going to win the NFC West. They're behind the Cardinals, who are 10-4, and you've also got the Rams, who are 10-4. So you're likely not going to gain 2 games on them, but then the teams behind them, you've got the Vikings, Eagles, Saints, all at 7-7, and then right behind them, the Washington football team and the Falcons are both at 6-8. So the 49ers, this is a very important game for them because if they win tonight, they put the pressure on the Vikings, Eagles, Saints, Washington, and the Falcons to all win this weekend. If they lose tonight, it opens the door for any one of those teams to gain a game on them and potentially overtake them in the
For
NFC.
sure.
So,
and like all these games, I feel like for the rest of the season are just going to matter. Like
yeah.
Any single win or loss can just boost a team's morale or just crush their playoff hopes.
Exactly. Right now, it seems like every game matters just because of how close this race is. I mean, how many times have we seen this many teams competing for a playoff spot this late in the season? I mean, normally you'll see a kind of a big group of maybe like 10 teams, but you can usually start to look at maybe the 10th team or the 9th team and be like, okay, they're not that good. You really can't do that this year. It seems like everybody's just about equal and there's a ton of parity.
I feel like it could go any way at this point.
Yeah. And then do you have a pick for tonight's game?
I think just knowing everything, I feel like I do have to go with the 49ers.
Yeah.
I do think they have the edge over Tennessee. Tennessee, when they're healthy, can be a very dangerous team. They are not healthy. They have been struggling recently, and so I'm taking the 49ers over the Tennessee Titans tonight.
And that's another thing with Tennessee. How dangerous can they be in the playoffs if Derrick Henry comes back for the playoffs? Because that's still a very strong possibility. And now, if he comes back, I mean, the Titans looked like they could be the best team in the NFL with Derrick Henry. And now, granted, that was kind of before the Chiefs and Patriots both really came on in the AFC.
Yeah.
But still, that adds a little bit more interest to the AFC picture because, I mean, the AFC, the Chiefs are starting to kind of pull away a little bit, in my opinion. They're starting to look like the Chiefs that we've seen the last couple of years. They're starting to look like they're in position to
For
make
sure.
it to another Super Bowl. But the AFC has a ton of competition, and the Chiefs will not have an easy path back to the Super Bowl, no matter how well they are playing. So
I think for the Titans, although they are the underdogs, I also feel like for them, this should be like a must win for them because they are tied with the Patriots for record. They're both 9-5.
yeah.
And the Titans can get that little boost into second seeding.
Well, the main thing for the Titans right now is they have a Colts high on their tail at 8-6 in that division. The good news for the Titans is they have that tiebreaker over the Colts. So no matter what, they pretty much have an extra game on them. But that's still shaping up to be a very interesting race when the Titans, after they beat the Colts the second time, I didn't think the Colts had a shot, but here they come with Jonathan Taylor flexing his muscles in every game. And
Yep.
I mean, looking like he could be a front runner for the MVP potentially. I mean, so, but I think that's enough on that game because there are just a plethora of great games this weekend. The Browns play the Packers. The Browns, I believe, are still dealing with some COVID issues. So the Packers are a 7.5-point favorite. The Packers have already clinched. So it's hard to know how much they will care, but you assume they'll have just as much fire for this game as they would for any other game because they want that 1 seed.
Yeah, they fell to the Raiders in the last game with that last second field goal. And I thought the Browns still played fairly well that game.
Yeah.
So they have potential to play well. They've just been cursed with some bad luck, I think, recently.
So, yeah, I still don't know who the starting quarterback will be for the Browns in this game. I don't think there's been any announcements made about that. But that's going to be a big factor in this game. It could really affect this line. I don't think the Browns are all that good of a team personally. Baker Mayfield has already came out this season and said he's more banged up than he's ever been. Things are just kind of falling apart for the Browns. The one good thing for them is this defense and Myles Garrett. I mean, really leading this defense. They're playing extremely well and taking a lot of the pressure off Baker Mayfield, Case Keenum. I mean, we saw Nick Mullins the other day. He didn't look that terrible. He didn't look good, but when your defense is holding opponents to 20 points or less on a pretty consistent basis, you don't necessarily need Baker Mayfield or Case Keenum to step up. So if this defense keeps playing well, the Browns, I mean, right now, they are sitting at, what are they, 7-7?
Yeah, Browns 7-7.
So they're, again, right in the mix in the playoffs. But they do have a pretty tough schedule, obviously, with the Packers coming up and a couple games in their division. So it's hard to know what to make of the Browns. I don't think they're that good. I personally think the Packers will probably dominate this game, just being as it's in Lambeau, tough place to play.
Yep. I think the Packers are going to win that game.
Yeah.
They're going to go to 12-3 on the year.
And then that's going to pretty much put a huge damper on the Browns' playoff hopes. Just because, I mean, that division, you've got all 4 teams in that division can make the playoffs. And now you've got games coming up against the Packers, the Steelers, and the Bengals to close your season. So they pretty much still kind of control their own destiny. If you can beat the Steelers and the Bengals, they have a pretty good shot of making the playoffs, but I don't know that I trust the Browns to win 2 out of their last 3 games right now.
It's going to be really tough.
Yeah, so the Packers already clinched, looking for the 1 seed for the 2nd straight year in the NFC. The Browns probably not making the playoffs, but things could change. Next big game this weekend, and there's just a ton of them. The Colts against the Cardinals. The Cardinals are a 1-point favorite right now, coming off that loss to the Lions, so a big bounce back spot for the Cardinals. But the Colts look really good right now.
They do,
And
Jack.
it's tough for me to trust a Cardinals team without DeAndre Hopkins. They didn't just lose to the Lions, they got crushed by the Lions. And I don't know that you can really bounce back from that, especially against a tough Colts team.
It's going to be a challenge for the Cardinals for sure. They taking that big loss at Detroit. I think personally, you got to erase that one, throw it in the trash bin. You got to focus on this game.
And the Cardinals are still in pretty good shape right now. They're 10-4, so they're pretty much cemented into the playoffs, barring anything crazy. But the Colts, I mean, they're in a tougher spot. This is more of a must-win game for them than it would be for the Cardinals, and I think they're going to come into this game fired up. I almost think that this is a spot where there's going to be a lot of people picking the Cardinals, thinking they're going to bounce back off that loss to the Lions. I just can't trust the Cardinals without DeAndre Hopkins right now. Again, losing to the Lions is one thing. Losing to the Lions the way the Vikings lost to the Lions on a last-second touchdown is one thing. The Cardinals were never in that game. The Cardinals quite literally never had a chance against the worst team in the league. And now you have to play a feisty Colts team. I just don't know how anybody could trust the Cardinals right now to win this game. But
I think another big game from what I'm seeing this weekend is going to be the Vikings and the Rams. Yep. I just saw that Dalvin Cook is on the COVID list now, so it looks like he's going to be out for that game.
Yep.
And I just, being a Vikings fan, this is a must-win. The Rams, they're a good team, but Kirk Cousins has had a very good season. I would not count him out, and he's going to be needed this game against the Rams.
So the one thing about this game, and I've said this all season long, it's been the case with the Vikings for a while now. The Vikings cannot string wins together. And here they are coming off 2 straight wins, having to face the Rams, who look like they could be one of the favorites in the NFC. Now it is at home, which will help the Vikings. And Kirk Cousins is obviously a lot better in the noon time slot than he is in literally any other time slot.
Oh, for sure.
So there's 2 things help the Vikings, but the issue I've had with the Vikings all season, and the issue I'm going to continue to have with them, and the reason I don't think they can make a deep run in the playoffs, is because of the fact that they just can't seem to have multiple good games in a row. I mean, if you look at their season so far and you look at the big wins they've picked up, they beat the Seahawks, came back the next week, laid an egg against the Browns, lost 14-7. They beat the Panthers, came back the next week, lost to a backup quarterback in Cooper Rush. They beat the Chargers. They beat the Chargers and the Packers back-to-back, came back after that, lost to the 49ers. And then they lost to Lions right after that. So it's hard for me to trust the Vikings right now, but you definitely can't count them out at home. They're one of the
No.
more they have one of the more underrated home field advantages in the NFL, in my opinion. But the Rams, I mean, you have Cooper Kupp, who's just having an absolutely insane season. Matthew Stafford still is looking really good, and Odell Beckham seems to be finding his place in that offense. The Rams defense is down right now, but that hasn't really mattered because of the fact that you now have Matthew Stafford instead of Jared Goff. You now have a quarterback who's actually semi-competent instead of Jared Goff. But this line is sitting at 3 right now. So it's very, very close in Vegas's eyes. I do like the Rams here, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings pull something out. I just have an issue with Mike Zimmer and coaching. And then, of course, Dalvin Cook being out really doesn't help them either.
I think the biggest disappointment for me has just been the play calling this entire season.
Yep.
I've seen so many either runs on 2nd and long, or you're just dumping it off 3rd and long, and they're getting, 4 yards when you need 8.
Yep. And it's been an issue with the Vikings, and I feel like it's just rinse and repeat every year that it just seems like Mike Zimmer doesn't know what to do.
I think Mike Zimmer, he has this like plan in his head, but I also think he's just always kept that same like game plan, even though his roster has changed over the years.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these players probably can't live up to those expectations that we had with, what was it, the 2017-2018 season where they got to the, NFC Championship.
Miracle, yeah.
It's like your roster has changed. You need to change your game plan as well.
Well, and then it's not just the roster. The game of football over these past few years has changed a lot. Obviously, we're seeing, I mean, one of the biggest, most notable things is teams going for it on 4th down a lot more than they used to, or, we're obviously seeing a lot more trick plays than we once did. Things like that, where as a coach, you have to adapt. And there's a reason that Bill Belichick is still so good. And it's because he has adapted to this changing game. And there's a reason that Mike Zimmer is seen as, I mean, what I would say is a bad coach, is because he has a ton of talent on that roster, but he just doesn't seem to know how to use it. And we saw against the Packers in the first game the Vikings played against the Packers. Why are you not taking more shots with Justin Jefferson? The Vikings have not done that enough this season. Justin Jefferson is by far their biggest playmaker, and they seem very content with just checking it down, handing it off to Dalvin Cook, checking it down. And that's their entire offense. And when you saw what Justin Jefferson did to the Packers defense, I don't understand why you continue to run the same stuff over and over and over again when you know Justin Jefferson has a lot more potential.
I think we could see Jefferson play a big role in this game, though.
We could
have the Rams defense is looking a little shaky. Dalvin Cook is going to be out. You have to, I think they need to incorporate Justin Jefferson into this game a lot.
Yeah.
He's got to be like their main target this game. That's how they're going to win the game. I was also looking at the seeding here. I do think it's a must-win for the Vikings because the Eagles are sitting right behind them.
It definitely is, because
the Eagles face the Giants this
so right now you face the Rams, and then you face the Packers. It's going to be very hard to beat the Packers on the road, and I mean, beating them twice in one season is almost impossible, the way they basically ran the NFC North for, I mean, ever since Aaron Rodgers was the starter.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Bears to close their season, and the Vikings, as is the case with most of these teams in both the AFC and NFC, like wild card races, you have to win 2 of those 3 games. And the Bears should be a win, but the Bears aren't a guarantee. Again, beating someone twice is not easy. And so you're looking at having to pick up at least 1 win against either the Rams or the Packers, and then having to beat the Bears. The Vikings are in a very, very tough spot right now. And a lot of that is because of their loss to the Lions. Because looking back a couple weeks ago, I had said the Vikings still have games against the Lions and 2 games against the Bears. And then the rest of their schedule is Steelers, Rams, Packers. You would have assumed they'd beat the Bears twice and they'd beat the Lions. Well, that loss to the Lions really hurts. And now, instead of just having to win against the Lions and the Bears twice, you now have to win against either the Packers or the Rams, and you may have to beat both of them plus beat the Bears. And I don't trust the Vikings to do that.
They're going to choke one of those games, I feel like.
Yeah.
It's just the typical Viking tradition.
So it's going to be very tough for the Vikings. The Rams still battling for that division title in the NFC West with the Cardinals. That's shaping up to be very interesting. Either way, no matter how those 2 teams end up shaking out, I do think the Rams are a better team than the Cardinals. I think they're a better, bigger threat in the playoffs than the Cardinals, but both those teams could make playoff runs.
For sure.
Another big game we're looking at this weekend, the Ravens play the Bengals. I still don't think the Ravens are that good. Lamar Jackson, I mean, right now it's Tyler Huntley, but Lamar Jackson has looked awful. I mean, Tyler Huntley has looked better than Lamar Jackson. If you look at the Ravens, their last, let's see, back to when they played the Dolphins on November 11th, they scored 10 points in that game. They scored 16, 16, 19, 20, 22, and 30. So they had 4 games in a row with Lamar Jackson scoring less than 20 points. And now this defense has held their opponents to 22, 13, 10, 20, 24, and 31. So this defense has stepped up, but right now, I mean, you look at the 2 games that Tyler Huntley has played most of the game, they scored more points than 4 games where Lamar Jackson played the entire game. So you start to wonder if Tyler Huntley, I mean, I'm not going to speculate and say Tyler Huntley is better than Lamar Jackson, but I'm willing to still admit that Tyler Huntley looks like he could have a starting QB job next year, the way he's playing.
I think so.
He led a comeback against the Packers, and if John Harbaugh was not the dumbest coach in America, that game would have went to overtime. But John Harbaugh wants to go for 2, and even if they convert on that 2-point conversion, you're giving the ball to Aaron Rodgers with 45 seconds left, only needing a field goal. The Packers still probably win that game. So I don't really know what John Harbaugh was thinking there, but either way, Tyler Huntley looks good. I still think the Bengals win that game. Again, both these teams are desperate for a win. So there's not too much that you can argue about one team needing it more than the other. But the Bengals have lost 2 straight, or they've lost 2 of their last 3. They beat the Broncos last week. They'll be looking to kind of get things together. I still think the Bengals are a really good team. I think Joe Burrow is really good. That offense is very capable of putting up big numbers. And the Ravens just haven't shown me anything recently. So I have trouble trusting them right now in a big divisional game. That game is in Cincinnati, so tough to win on the road. Obviously, that division, there is bad blood with all those teams in that division. So I think the Bengals pull that one out at home. Moving along. Let's see. We already talked about Rams, Vikings, the Bills, Patriots for the second time this year. That game is fascinating because I mean, we saw the first game. Everybody saw the snowstorm that they were playing in. Mac Jones, I don't remember the exact stat. I think he threw the ball 2 times or three times all game.
I think it was 3 times.
And the Patriots still won. So now the Bills having to travel into Foxborough against a Patriots team that's playing extremely well. That game is very interesting because I don't think there's going to be a snowstorm with 40-mile-an-hour winds this weekend. So
No.
we'll get to see a little bit more of, these two teams basically being able to play to their full potential. Now where this game becomes most interesting to me is the Bills. Some of the questions, I don't know if you saw this, but some of the questions they got after that Patriots game were just, I mean, they were bad questions. Whoever those reporters were that were asking those questions were just dumb, but they essentially asked, I think Micah Hyde and it might have been like Tre'Davious White were up on the stand and they were asked about essentially not being able to stop a run. And they came back and said, well, we allowed, I think it was, 14-11 that game. So they came back and said, well, we only allowed 14 points or whatever it actually was.
Yep.
And, so they're going to be a little bit fired up, I'd say, for this game, which makes me think the Bills have a chance, but it's never easy to win in Foxborough.
No, and Mac Jones had such a great season.
He looks like the best rookie quarterback. I mean, Bill Belichick is still a great coach.
Yep. I see the Patriots taking this one in Foxborough.
So, yeah, it's tough for me to trust the Bills. I think I'm going to lean towards the Bills here responsibly just because I hate betting on teams to beat a team twice in the same season. I absolutely hate it, especially when you have two teams that are this equally matched. So I'll probably lean towards the Bills. Either way, both these teams should make the playoffs, I'd say. I mean, the Patriots obviously in better position than the Bills. They're a game up right now on the Bills, but the Bills, let me see. I don't even know who they closed their season with. I'm going to pull that up real quick. They closed their season with, this game against the Patriots, and then they have the Falcons and the Jets. So the Falcons and the Jets are both very winnable games. They should win both of those, which would certainly be enough for them to make the playoffs, I'd assume. So both those teams should be fine no matter what happens in this game. Next big game in the NFL, we have the Steelers against the Chiefs. I don't really know how anybody can pick against the Chiefs right now. This line is 8.5. The Chiefs are starting to get that respect once again. The Steelers are a little bit more desperate in this spot, but having to go to Arrowhead with the Chiefs competing for that number 1 seed once again, I don't know that I can trust the Steelers right now.
The Steelers looked awful against the Vikings.
Yeah.
I watched that game a couple weeks ago.
Until the second half.
Yep. And everything, they just look so out of sync.
Yeah.
And the Vikings are a mediocre team this year. The Chiefs are the real deal. I think the Chiefs are going to run away with this one. I really do.
And
I think their defense is just so good this year.
Yeah.
And Patrick Mahomes has started to really play a lot better these past
Yeah,
few
they're
games.
they're not turning the ball over as much, which was the biggest issue with the Chiefs early on in the season. But you talk about this Chiefs defense, their last few games, they've allowed 28 points, 9 points, 9 points, 9 points, 14 points, 7 points, 17 points. So
They're the real deal.
really, I mean, and they aren't facing bad teams.
No.
They gave up 28 to the Chargers last week, but 9 against the Raiders, 9 against the Broncos, 9 against the Cowboys, 14 against the Raiders, 7 against the Packers. Granted, that was the game that the Packers had Jordan Love, but still, this Chiefs defense looking a lot better than we normally expect. And if this offense can keep playing well, you never really know what this Chiefs team is capable of, but they could very easily make another Super Bowl run. And then the Steelers, again, just another one of those teams, and it's crazy how many important games we have this late in the season, because this never happens. I mean,
No.
there should be no reason that we are talking about this many games this late in the season, but I am absolutely 100% here for it. I absolutely love that this many games actually matter. Watching Red Zone on Sunday with every game, or pretty much every game, meaning something is absolutely wild. But the Steelers, they close their season with the Chiefs, the Browns, and the Ravens. So again, if you can beat the Browns and the Ravens, well, there you go. You're probably in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then, if they can somehow pull this win out against the Chiefs, they'll be in really good shape. They currently sit at 9th in the AFC, 7-6-1. So they're right there. That tie, it's still hard to know if that will help them or hurt them, because I mean, I could just see the Steelers finishing the season 9-7-1, and let's say just like the Ravens and the Bills finishing 9-8, and the Steelers getting in at 9-7-1 over a pair of 9-8 teams, which would be absolutely insane. So the tie could help them. It could also hurt them, obviously, if they finish 9-7-1 and you have a bunch of teams finishing 10-7. Because again, that tie came against the Lions, so they should be, that game should have been a win. But either way, that's another interesting playoff picture game. Then you have the Broncos against the Raiders. Both those teams, I believe, are 7-7 right now. Yeah, both 7-7. I think the Broncos are trending a little bit more in the right direction than the Raiders are right now. Ever since the Raiders lost Henry Ruggs, they have looked pretty much dead. I mean, that offense lacking that playmaker down the field is not good for them. And so I'm curious to hear what you think about this game.
I think it's going to be tough for sure. I mean, I think like they're both, 7-7 teams. But yeah, I do think the Broncos have that edge.
Yeah.
I think they've been playing better recently over the few weeks, and I think the Raiders, like you said, have been struggling. I see the Broncos winning this one. I really do.
Yep. And then looking at the Raiders, their last few games, they scored 16, 9, 15. They scored 36 against the Cowboys, but before that, it was 13, 14, 16. So this offense, ever since Henry Ruggs has left, outside of that game against the Cowboys, they look pretty much completely dead in the water. The Broncos don't necessarily have a great offense. They scored 10 against the Bengals, 38 against the Lions. And then 9 against the Chiefs, 28 against the Chargers. So they're a little bit more inconsistent. But again, it seems like if you can score 20 against the Raiders right now, you're going to win. And I think the Broncos are capable of doing that. So
I see it too,
I
Jack.
do think the Broncos win this game. This loss, whoever loses this game, it really hurts their playoff hopes. So we'll see. That's an interesting game in terms of the AFC wild card. Continuing to move on, the Washington football team playing against the Cowboys. Washington sitting at 6-8. This is pretty much a must win for Washington if they want to make the playoffs. You're probably not making it in the AFC as an 8-9 team. So Washington, a 10.5 point underdog, but Washington, sneaky kind of playing well right now. And I mean, the Cowboys still look really good. I don't know that Washington will win this game, but I definitely think they'll cover 10.5. Just with how much fire they're playing with right now. Just a couple weeks back, the Cowboys beat Washington 27-20. But Washington, they don't allow a ton of points. Their defense has allowed 27, 27, 15, 15, 21, 19, 17, 24. So they're playing well on that side of the ball, but this offense also does not look very good. They have scored 17, 20, 17, 17, 27. So, they're getting held to under 20.
Yeah.
It's tough to trust them to keep up with the Cowboys. So it's tough for me to trust them to win this game, but I do think they cover the 10.5 points.
Yeah. Cowboys win that game. And they're going to remain first in the NFC East.
All right. And then the last big game of the weekend is, I believe this is the Monday night game. It's the Dolphins against the Saints. That's just an ugly, ugly game. That game might finish 2-0. That they might score 2 points. The Dolphins, though, they've kind of come on a little bit after looking pretty much dead. They've put themselves back in the AFC playoff picture, and you cannot rule the Dolphins out right now. They have won. How many games have they won in a row?
They won 7 in a row.
7 in a row. Now facing a Saints team that's in a prime letdown spot, coming off that win against the Bucs. Both teams needing a win to help their playoff hopes.
And like the Saints, they got that win over the Bucs last week, but it was an ugly game, like 9-0.
And the Bucs, just for whatever reason, don't know how to beat the Saints in the regular season. I don't know what it is, but
there's a trend there, I guess.
It's tough to really pick a side here. I'd lean towards the Dolphins to win this game, but I think the under might be the play of the week just because neither of these offenses looks all that good. So
yeah, I think the Saints win this game.
Yeah,
I think the Dolphins I don't think they have they've been playing well, but I feel like they're due to hit the wall again at some
you
point.
almost think the Dolphins are going to fall off eventually. I still just can never trust the Saints with Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill is not a starting quarterback. He's good when they use him, for other purposes, coming in those random packages as a receiver or running back, whatever. But outside of that, he's not that good. It's going to be an interesting game. Again, it's going to be one that I might fall asleep during because I just feel like you're going to see no scoring. But that game really does affect the playoff hunt in both the AFC and the NFC. So it's going to be an interesting one. So that's about all we've got for the NFL. Moving right along to some college football news. one of the big stories, and it sucks that we're dealing with this again. COVID-19 pulls Texas A&M out of the Gator Bowl, where they were supposed to face off against, I believe it was Wake Forest. Wake Forest. Breaking news: Rutgers will be replacing Texas A&M against Wake Forest. That game just lost a lot of juice for me. Texas A&M really good. Texas A&M Wake Forest would have been a great game. Rutgers is not a good team. Wake Forest has one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. They have a couple really good receivers in Ja'Cory Roberson and A.T. Perry. Wake Forest probably blows them out.
I see it happening.
That is good. That is good that Wake Forest was able to find an opponent. I'm happy about that just because Wake Forest has had a historic season, and it would have absolutely sucked if Wake Forest had to basically not play in a bowl game because of another team getting COVID. So Texas A&M is out, Wake Forest is in. And so that's one of the big stories about college football coming into today. I do wonder, and this has just been an issue plaguing the sports world right now, because apparently whatever new strand of COVID is out right now just does not care about your vaccination status whatsoever.
No.
So I do start to wonder if this could affect more than just this bowl game. If we could see this, playing a role in even more bowl games, it would absolutely suck if we had to deal with that. But you can't really rule it out right now because of what's going on. So right now, so that's that ball game really won't be as good as it could have been. Not too much news in ball games so far. UAB beat BYU. That's kind of the biggest storyline that I've taken out of the ball game so far. But obviously, you've got all these kind of lower tier bowl games that I'm only really watching because I bet on them. Most of the news coming into college football right now is the transfer portal and the coaching carousel right now. I'm not going to go over all the coaching hires just because there's too many to even talk about, but we all know the two big ones. LSU hires former Notre Dame head coach Brian Kelly. USC hires former Oklahoma head coach Lincoln Riley. So that will be very interesting. LSU now has a coach. Ed Orgeron was not a good coach. Now LSU brings on a guy in Brian Kelly who found success at Notre Dame, who's led his team to the college football playoff, who's done all that. And then USC brings in a guy in Lincoln Riley, who's done the same thing at Oklahoma, led his team to the college football playoff, had a lot of success there. So those two coaching hires are very interesting. And then Oklahoma ends up bringing on Clemson, former Clemson defensive coordinator, Brent Venables. We obviously know what he's done with the Clemson defense. And then Notre Dame announces that their former defensive coordinator will now be their head coach. The players love Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, so I'm interested to see where that goes. The story really with those two hires is we never know what a coordinator is going to do when he ends up being a head coach. Some of them fall flat on their face and clearly can't, have that head coach role. Some of them thrive and prosper, and the hire ends up looking really good. So those two are kind of the big news in the coaching carousel. There's obviously a lot more, but there's way too many to talk about. And then we look at the transfer portal. Some of the biggest names: Spencer Rattler going to South Carolina. So he leaves Oklahoma, goes to South Carolina. Michael Penix going from Indiana to Washington. Eli Ricks, LSU to Bama. Dylan Gabriel, UCF to UCLA. Max Johnson, LSU to Texas A&M. Casey Thompson announced that he's entering the portal. Quinn Ewers, so one of the most highly touted recruits of all time, got all this NIL money from Ohio State or from, local businesses, whatever. He's transferring to Texas, so that's going to make things really interesting. We didn't get to see Quinn Ewers play last year. He's supposed to be really good, so it's going to be interesting seeing what he can do at Texas. Bo Nix going from Auburn to Oregon, Jack Miller from Ohio State to Florida, Keaton Slovis from USC to Pitt, among a bunch of other names that are going to be either entering the transfer portal, have already entered the transfer portal. I mean, this is a crazy era of college football because now it's not just about recruiting the best talent. It's about having success in the transfer portal, getting the right guys for your team. Because as of right now, we're seeing that a lot of these teams, college teams, are not going to have a backup quarterback anymore. Everybody, if you're a backup quarterback at a school, you're pretty much just transferring anywhere you can so that you can start. And then it's almost the same thing for running backs. You're not going to see too many teams having two running backs. We saw like North Carolina last year with Javonte Williams and Michael Carter having that two-headed monster in the backfield. But the transfer portal is such an interesting concept right now. I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on this, Johnny, just because, this has added a whole new aspect to what college football will be in the next few years because of how many transfers there are.
Yeah, I think it kind of really just shows in perspective of like how many players, want that playing time. Because everyone's, dream is to usually wanting to get to that NFL stage. And if you are, a backup to a team, it's not going to help at all. You want to play. And I feel like with a lot of these transfers, no matter how much they show their coaches that they're ready, it always seems like with them, there's always someone who's better or more qualified to start. And so I've just really seen over the last few seasons that more and more college players are using the transfer portal. And I think it does help in the college football world, knowing that there's so many young and determined players wanting to show how good they can be.
Yep.
And so I think overall that aspect of just wanting to get that playing time and just showing other teams how good they can be, I think really does help.
Yeah.
And I think this trend is going to continue for probably years. I think this is just the start of something really big.
It definitely is just the start. And a lot of it has been the change of transfers, not having to sit out that 1 year after transferring. They can just come in and play right away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of what we're seeing. Again, this is going to be big news for weeks to come right now as teams start to finish up their bowl games. We're going to see a lot more players entering the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
And it does make head coaches adjust a lot more because, again, now it's not about recruiting the best talent. It's about, well, how do we retain this talent?
Yep.
Because, again, someone that went to Alabama as a freshman could not see any time on the field as a freshman and want to leave. And now, Alabama is so good, obviously, at just reloading every year. We usually don't worry about that, but we start to wonder how much this transfer portal can affect these good teams from year to year. Are you going to see the same teams every single year? Are you going to continue to see the Alabamas and the Clemsons? They're obviously still going to be good, but are they going to be the clear favorite to win the national championship every year with all these transfers? Players potentially wanting to leave Clemson and Alabama more than they ever have.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, again, this is adding a whole nother aspect to college football. Yeah, that's the big news. I don't know if you want to look into any of the college football bowl games. I mean, there's obviously a few big ones. We've still got some time before those.
Yeah.
But
Maybe I'll talk about that as it approaches, but I know that some of the bigger ones, I think, like the Alamo Bowl, Oregon Ducks versus Oklahoma.
yeah,
That game, I think that's going to be a very intriguing game. I mean,
that's a fascinating game because, well, you have two teams that don't have a coach, which it almost makes it less interesting. But at the same time, I do think if both these teams had a coach, Lincoln Riley and Oklahoma would just dog walk Oregon. But now that they don't, again, as the time approaches, we're probably going to hear about news of more and more opt-outs, which makes things very interesting. Yesterday we saw with Missouri, their top running back and then their quarterback. So Connor Bazelak and Tyler Beatty both opted out again in their bowl game against Army. If they both play, they might have won that game. They probably should have won that game anyways, but I don't even remember their backup quarterback's name. They went for too late to go up by 3 instead of 1. He misses a wide open player. Army gets the ball back, marches down the field, gets into field goal range, kicks the game-winning field goal. It should have been the game tying field goal, forcing overtime. Instead, it won Army the game. So yeah, Army beats Missouri yesterday. But yeah, as these kind of bigger games outside of the college football playoff, we saw it last year. There's probably going to be loads and loads of opt-outs as the time gets closer for these games. So I'm more erring on the side of just waiting till those opt-outs happen.
Yeah.
But we can potentially dive a little bit into the college football playoff. Alabama against Cincinnati. One of the interesting things about that game is the injury to John Mechie now opens the door a little bit more for Cincinnati, because now you've only got to cover one elite receiver instead of 2. And Cincinnati already has a couple really good cornerbacks in what's his face? Gardner and I'm blanking on the other guy's name, but Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant, both really good secondary guys. Now you've only really got to worry about Jamison Williams. You don't have that threat of John Mechie. It makes things very interesting. I do still think Alabama wins this game.
Yeah.
But this does add a whole new aspect to the matchup.
For sure. And then Georgia, Michigan. I think, they're both 12-1, but I think Georgia's has been and always, I think, will just always be that powerhouse team. I think Georgia, I don't want to say they're going to blow out Michigan, but I think they're going to easily have the advantage over Michigan.
Yeah. The one thing with Michigan is that, they've had a great season, but Georgia now, it almost helps that they lost to Alabama, because now you've got an angry Georgia team. Michigan, I just don't trust them. Like, they can run the ball well, but Georgia has a really good run defense, and that Michigan offense, outside of being able to run the ball extremely well. They don't have too much. Like Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins have played extremely well this season, but Cade McNamara does not look that good. And you aren't really facing elite defenses in the Big Ten. Like, yeah, you could argue for Iowa, but Georgia is still much better than Iowa. Georgia slowed down an SEC schedule all season. Up until Bama, they were stopping everybody. And I just don't see a way that Michigan scores in this game. I don't think Georgia's going to put up that many points, but I think they'll do enough to win that game. Again, as the time gets closer, I'll have more to say about that. But as of right now, I lean towards Georgia and Alabama meeting in the national championship in a rematch.
I see that as well.
Very interesting game. But I do think the two underdogs, I do think Cincinnati has a better chance of winning than Michigan. If one of the underdogs were to win, I think it would be Cincinnati.
Yeah. I mean, they have an undefeated record and have played very well, but I would still give them the advantage over Michigan.
But yeah, so the college football playoff, a little bit more parity this year than what we usually see. There's no clear-cut number one team like we've seen, last year with Alabama, a few years ago with LSU. You've got a little bit of parity here, so hard to know what will happen, but yeah, not too much else on the college football front.
Yeah,
the last
we'll have to see.
Big topic, I'd say.
Let's jump to the NBA.
I guess NBA, and then we can close the show out with college basketball a little bit.
Sounds good.
The NBA, I mean, I'd say the biggest storyline this season, and I've talked about them all season, is the Golden State Warriors with no Klay Thompson. They continue to just flex their muscles. Steph Curry basically is just on what seems to be an FU tour, because every single game, it just seems like he finds a way to make a big shot. At one point, he could be 1 of 7 from 3 in the first quarter and just completely turn it on. He obviously broke the record for 3-pointers. So is anybody going to slow down the Warriors, especially when they get Klay Thompson back?
I don't see it happening. Like, that team has just remained historically so good over these last few years.
Yeah.
And now it's like you have a Clayless Warriors team, and yet they're still sitting second in the West just behind Phoenix.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone expected this, to be honest.
And yeah, the Suns obviously really good. They could make another run at the NBA Finals, but
I still think the Warriors are their biggest rival right now.
Yeah. And so that's going to be interesting. A couple notes I do want to make of a couple disappointing teams, one in the West, one in the East, most notably in the West. And I'm going to keep saying it. It continues to be the Los Angeles Lakers, who now have a team full of old guys that aren't that good anymore.
They're all out of their prime, and just, I think when you have all that like star power, I think it really like turns more into trying to keep their own individual numbers up rather than trying to play as a team.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, they have Westbrook, they have AD, they have LBJ, like Dwight Howard.
All these guys,
They have all these players who are either like Anthony Davis, I think that would be the only exception. I know he hasn't been playing the best this season. Yeah. But he's technically in his prime right now.
He looks the most out of anybody on that team. He looks the most in his prime.
Yeah.
LeBron James is still capable of going and getting his on any given night, but he has certain games where I'm just like, LeBron James needs to retire.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's that's a thought that's running through my head. Again, he's still very good at scoring. He's still very good at basketball, but he will have nights where he'll shoot, let's just say 1 of 10. And I'm sitting there like, why is he still in the league? And I do understand this idea of, LeBron James turning it up in the playoffs. I just don't know that he's at the age where he can do that anymore because he doesn't have the help around him.
No.
Again, you've got a bunch of these older guys who it almost just frankly seems like by the end of the season, by the time the playoffs come, they're just going to be worn out. They're too old to, sustain this ability to play throughout a long season. And you've got, teams like the Suns with guys like DeAndre Ayton or those younger stars, or, the Warriors with obviously a Steph Curry who's still in his prime, a Klay Thompson whenever he comes back, Draymond Green who's really good at defending, like guys like that. And then you've still got these like bench guys that are still like really young and can get the job done, where it's like, yeah, the Lakers have a bench of a bunch of names that we've all heard of, but how good are they right now? And what we're seeing right now is they're clearly not that good. The Lakers are in a very similar spot to where they were last year, where they may be stuck playing in the play-in games in the playoffs. So
yeah, I think the rest of the season could definitely be a struggle for them. I think the chemistry is not there.
Yeah.
Everyone I think wants to play, hero ball instead of, trying to contribute to the team. And, I feel like, Russell Westbrook,
yeah,
I feel like he just takes too many shots and misses a good amount of those shots as well. He's not clutch. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Russell Westbrook, he's averaging the numbers. I think he's still like nearing the end or has gotten out of his prime.
He's still good. I don't think he fits in with that Lakers team.
No, I feel like the system doesn't work in his favor.
Exactly. And
looking
at continue. What? Yeah, say what you were going to say.
I was also looking at the standings, and one of the teams that actually kind of caught me by surprise that look a little more disappointing this year are the Portland Trailblazers. Yeah. I mean, they're sitting 10th in the West. They are 13-19 on the season, but they are 2-8 in their last 10 games.
Yeah, and
what
they've
is going
had
on in Portland?
The injury bug with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum both missing some time this year. But yeah, they don't look that great.
No,
but either way, I do want to move to the East a little bit. I mean, at the top of the East, I don't know that you really have a clear-cut top team. Like in the West, I think it's very clearly the Warriors and the Suns. In the East, the Nets, the Bulls, and the Bucks are your top three. I feel like those three teams are all literally the same team.
Yeah, looking at the standings, 1 through 5, it's separated by 2 games, 2 wins.
Yep.
Miami is 19-13 in 5th place. Brooklyn is 21-9. And so it's a very tight race in the East right now. And I don't expect it to hold like this for like the majority of the season.
And it is interesting now the Nets bringing Kyrie Irving back as a part-time player, whatever that means. I mean, I haven't looked at it too much. I haven't read into it too much. I kind of just saw that news and I'm like, what is going on in the NBA?
Yeah.
So whatever being a part-time player means, it will be interesting to see, if, or when Kyrie Irving is on the court, how much better are the Nets going to be? Can they be this great team that we kind of expected when they ended up getting James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and KD? Or are they gonna potentially fold in the playoffs to, a Bulls or a Bucks or a Heat? And again, no clear-cut number one in the East, the most impressive team this season, and I think just about everybody can agree on it, is the Cleveland Cavaliers, who
Yeah.
really, I mean, they went out, Evan Mobley playing really, really well. But then they've got just this really young roster, finding kind of just emerging stars. Obviously, a big one being Evan Mobley, rookie out of USC. They just continue to win games, and currently sitting at fourth in the East, they could be a big threat in the playoffs. And they don't have the talent to where you'd think, oh, they're going to go win a playoff game or a playoff series, but here we are. I mean, the Cleveland Cavaliers may not only make the playoffs, they may be hosting or have the home court advantage in their first playoff series. Again, it's too early in the season to read too much into it. But yeah, the East looks very interesting. I think there's a lot more parity in the East than there is in the West. One team I do want to talk about, the Atlanta Hawks have been an extremely disappointing team after they made some noise in the playoffs last year. They look awful. And now Trae Young has COVID, and so they're another team getting affected by this COVID bug. But they do not look good. They're currently sitting at 11th in the East. And again, they're only 2 games behind the Celtics at 8th. So they could still very well make the playoffs. But I had them as kind of one of the sleeper teams in the East, and they just haven't really seemed to pan out this year.
No. Another team I noticed that has been struggling are the Boston Celtics, sitting 8th in the East. Yeah. Historically, this team has probably been like between like a 4 and a 6 seed in the East.
Yeah.
But that doesn't look like they're really clicking at all this year.
And I do think the Celtics have been affected. Jaylen Brown has missed some time. Al Horford has missed some time. So they've been affected a little bit by injuries. Again, Jaylen Brown being out is a big one for them. I do think, I mean, Jason Tatum is still really good, but I do think he needs some help. And when they don't have Jaylen Brown, they've looked really bad. So that's about, I mean, the big news in the NBA. There's not really too many other teams that I'd like to highlight. Those are kind of the most impressive teams / most disappointing teams that I wanted to talk about. I guess moving right along, the last big topic will be a little bit into college basketball, and then we'll wrap things up. Baylor remains the number 1 team in the nation. They're coming off that national championship. They obviously lost a bunch of guys, MaCio Teague. They lost Jared Butler, and they lost Davion Mitchell, those 3 guards last year that really kind of carried that team. But coming back this year, still on top. They've got LJ Cryer, Kendall Brown, and James Akinjo all averaging double digits in scoring this season. And they're coming off that win against Villanova just recently. They're coming off a win against Oregon earlier this week. They've beat Michigan State this year. They've beat VCU this year. They're not playing bad teams, and they still look really good. Again, I know you're not as big into college basketball as I am, but could Baylor repeat as national champions?
I think it's very possible they could. They've looked red hot coming out of the gates this season, and I think they have what it takes to keep up that pace. Now, it's all about like who their opponents could become that March Madness time.
Yeah.
And I don't have like the standings pulled up, but
we do know obviously the Big 12 is still going to be very good, so they won't have an easy road through their conference by any means, but they do look very good right now. hard to repeat in college basketball, but they
Oh,
look
for
like they're
sure.
very capable of doing it. So,
Yep. It's
um,
so hard to because a lot of players now are like one and dones or they're 2 years.
yeah,
So many
exactly.
players just come and go, and so it's hard to repeat when the roster is always changing
Exactly.
and there aren't really any college players that stay like the 4 years anymore.
Exactly.
And so I think if that was more the case with that longer college career, I think a lot more teams could repeat. But just the
Mhm.
fact that so many players are just one and dones the
Yeah.
past few years, it's going to make it extremely difficult to repeat in any season.
Yeah. Um, and then again, kind of looking around the top 10, Duke looks really good this season. They're coming off a win against Virginia Tech. Paulo Banchero leading the way in that game with 23 points for the Blue Devils. But Duke also has a win against Gonzaga earlier this year. They did lose to Ohio State, but outside of that, they also have a win against Kentucky. They look really good. So that's going to be another big threat to potentially Baylor. Um, Purdue started out the season really strong. I'm just going to kind of roll through some of these teams and then talk about some of the more notable games as I get there. But Purdue starting out the season extremely strong. They had the loss to Rutgers, and then they struggled with NC State. So Purdue might not be as good as we once thought at the beginning of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Another big game this week, Gonzaga beating Texas Tech 69-55. Drew Timmy, Chet Holmgren, Julian Strother, and Rasir Bolton all scoring in double-digit points in that game. Gonzaga obviously looks like they're going to be a tough team to beat. Again, last year made it to the national championship, but ended up kind of getting punched in the mouth by Baylor early on and could never dig themselves out of that hole. It's going to be, I'd say, the similar story this year with Gonzaga is they're going to kind of roll through their easy West Coast Conference schedule, make it to the tournament, and be a little bit vulnerable because now they haven't played, a big game since the beginning of the season. And how are they going to handle that when it comes to March Madness? So, Gonzaga will still be a question mark in March Madness, but as of right now, they look really good. A big game that happened yesterday and one I want to talk about. Tennessee beats Arizona 77-73. John Fulkerson led the way for Tennessee with 24 points. Tennessee jumped out to a 16-2 lead right away in this game, but Arizona was able to pull it back before eventually losing a tight one. Tennessee continues to scare me just because of the fact that, they scored 77 in this game, but their offense is a major question mark. And I don't know that they're going to be too big of a threat when it comes to March Madness. They've had games where they just haven't been able to score. We saw them only score 52 points against Texas Tech earlier this year, 53 against Villanova. So they've had their struggles this season scoring. Definitely a concern. Another big note and something I've always, for a while now, not really been a huge fan of Alabama. They shoot way too many threes. They lose to Davidson 79-78. They lost to Memphis 92-78, and then they struggled a little bit with a Jacksonville State team. So after beating Houston, they've had 3 bad games in a row. They were 12 of 36 from 3 against Davidson. And for me personally, 36 threes is way too many. I don't care who you are. I don't care how well you're shooting. There should be no reason you're attempting 36 threes. but this seems to be the style of play that Alabama wants to play with. They like to shoot the ball. And I don't see them stopping, but that is a concern because if they aren't shooting, let's just say 50% from three, it seems like they're vulnerable to losing these games like they did to Davidson in a close one, 79-78. That's another big note. Something that we've seen with Alabama last year was that they were pretty good defensively. This year, though, I don't know what kind of defense they're playing, but it is not working. 92 points against the Memphis team that looked awful, and giving up 79 points against the Davidson team that, they're not bad, but they're not great by any means. So I do kind of wonder, can Alabama make a run in March if their defense doesn't pick it up? Because I don't really trust them to make any sort of noise in March. If you're giving up 79 points and you're shooting 36 threes a game, you're putting so much pressure on these guys to make 50% or more of these threes. And it's not like they're taking open threes every time. A lot of these are contested threes that are very low percentage. Again, it's the style of play that they play with, but if they're not playing well on defense, I don't really trust Alabama at all. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I think I've always said it. If the game plan isn't working, you gotta switch it up. 36 threes is just insane for college, nonetheless per game. Like, I think there's got to be some adjustments for sure, because as we've heard before, teams are going to live and die by the three.
Yeah.
And I think what a lot of teams don't realize nowadays, it's like they don't want to switch up what they're doing. But I think you have to if it's like not working. I feel like obviously the players that you have on your team can't live up to those expectations of hitting those shots.
Yeah.
And so you got to be able to, drive it into the paint, or,
you got to find
pass
ways.
the ball a couple more times.
Exactly.
Don't take contested shots.
Exactly.
So I think you got to just switch something up. I don't care what it is, but you got to stop, shooting these low percentage shots.
Yep.
And expect you're going to win the game.
Exactly. So, Alabama, they have a ton of talent. They were really good last year. They're still a good team, but they are struggling right now, making things really interesting. Not too much more in college basketball that I'm going to talk about or go too deep into. Seton Hall beat Texas 64-60. Jared Rhoden led the way for Seton Hall with 18 points. Texas, I'm not too concerned about them early in the season because that Texas team is full of transfers. So I do think they're going to take some time to start to gel a little bit. You've got Marcus Carr from Minnesota. You've got Trey Mitchell from UMass. Among others, but Timmy Allen from Utah. Again, it's a team where all these stars transferred in. They're still kind of trying to find their way in that offense. So I'm waiting to see Texas kind of break through. But Seton Hall, one of those sneaky Big East teams. Every single year we think about the Big East with Villanova, Xavier, Seton Hall, Providence, all these kind of sneaky good teams that could make some noise in March. Makes things interesting, but that was a big game that happened recently. Villanova beat Xavier 71-58. Justin Moore led the way with 17 points in that one. Villanova still, for me, I've kind of said it all season, and they did pick up this big win at home. their lack of options outside of Colin Gillespie really scares me. Getting Colin Gillespie back for them was huge after he got injured last year, but I don't know that Villanova can make too much noise in March win with how much their offense relies on Colin Gillespie having a good game.
Mhm.
And they lack bench scoring, so they're going to be a tough team to beat. But I kind of want to close this episode out again. I didn't want to take too much time on college basketball because we've been on for a while now.
Mhm.
But the last thing I want to talk about in college basketball, Kentucky last weekend, they beat North Carolina 98-69, an absolute blowout. Severe Wheeler leading the way with 26 points, 12 of 15 shooting. They followed that up with a win against Western Kentucky. They beat them 95-60, but this is a wild stat. Oscar Tshiebwe grabs 28 rebounds in the game for Western Kentucky. Oscar Tshiebwe, he may not be the best scoring guy that you're ever going to see, but I mean, Kentucky has plenty of scoring. Oscar Tshiebwe this season, it just seems like every time I've watched Kentucky, he's just a vacuum whenever that ball comes off a rim. Just every single rebound. I mean, it seems like you could have 3 guys around him and he'd still grab that ball. And that's an important thing to have when it comes to later in the season. You need to be able to grab rebounds. Second chance points, and any coach will tell you second chance points are a killer. And Oscar Tshiebwe, I do think, is playing a huge role in that Kentucky team in the sense that he can just grab every single rebound and really help his team out a lot underneath. So there's that. And that's all I've really got for today's episode. I don't know if you have anything else that you want to say.
Let's preview some of the upcoming games. I know we talked a lot about the NFL. It's gonna be a crazy weekend on the NFL. I hope everyone can watch those games, and the playoff race is just so tight right now that every game is gonna matter. Another preview. The Timberwolves take on the Jazz tonight in Salt Lake. Jazz are sitting third in the Western Conference.
A pretty heavy favorite in that game. I believe I saw around 11 and a half, 12 and a half. So
that could be a struggle for that Wolves team, who honestly, they haven't had the worst season. It's been okay, but it's just been okay. I want to see them take it up a couple of notches, but it's hard when a lot of players are in the COVID protocols and they can't play.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's going to be an amazing weekend of football. College games are still going to be going strong. Basketball.
Yeah, college basketball, there is kind of a little bit of a break here as of right now, just because of the simple fact that kind of everybody's going home for Christmas. There's a few games going on right now. The week, though, is a little bit slow. I know Liberty is playing Stanford right now in this the Hawaiian Airlines Diamond Head Classic, and this game's really close right now. I have that one pulled up on my TV. So tuning into those games as the big college basketball fan I am. But again, outside of the NFL, there isn't a ton coming up in the near future. The NFL is kind of the biggest news. Again, we spent a ton of time talking about it already, so we don't need to talk about it any more than we already have. But this weekend is going to be a fun weekend for football. And it all starts tonight with what is a great Thursday night football game with the 49ers and the Titans. But yeah, there's not too much else to say. We've been on here for a while, so we can wrap things up.
We hope to be back with you guys in a few days. It is the holiday season, so there might be a little bit of a gap this weekend, but we'll try to be back sometime next week, I would hope.
Yes, sir.
And we will have some more results and some more upcoming news, and it should be a good week for sports.
Yep. So we'll see you guys later. Thanks for tuning in.